All right. Well, hello. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm going to start by introducing myself. I'm Katie Lindsay. I'm the artistic director of Big Little Theater Company. And we have recently launched a new grant program called the Director Driven Production Grant. And Carly, you are the first recipient of our grant. So I'm here with Carly D.W. Bones. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Carly D.W. Bones. I am so thrilled and honored to be the first recipient of this grant. I am a theater director and intimacy director and coordinator. I also work at the intersections of arts and trauma sensitivity, supporting mental health for artists, sex education, community facilitation, and performance and ritual and magic and witchcraft. So all of those pieces kind of inform how I show up as an artist. And in this particular moment and iteration, and in regards to this grant, I am the director of the Aaron play, which is written by my husband and partner in life, art, and crime, Zachary Bones. And it has been conceived and developed by the two of us together over the last 7 years.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that beautiful intro. And I can't wait to talk about all of the things you mentioned. Yeah, so when I was thinking about creating this grant program, I was thinking about wanting to shine a light on the role directors can play in creating new work, whether as a co-conceiver, a generator, a intense, dramaturgical support, a play that requires a really big director's vision, right? Where like on the page, the playwright is inviting a director to really join them as a co-creator of what we're going to experience on the stage. So it just made perfect sense that you would be the first recipient of this grant as a director I really, really admire. And as someone who I was just so thrilled to see a piece that you've been working on for so long, getting this co-production with Coin and Ghost and Independent Shakespeare Company. So thrilled you're our first recipient, and I want to dive into your this piece and your practice as a director and get to share all of those wonderful things with the world. So why don't we start off by sharing about the initial conception of the Aaron play? Tell me about it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's wild because it's something I feel like we've been sitting with for such a long time. It's actually kind of become the lens through which I have in the container through which I'm able to like see and process and do something hopefully useful about everything that's happening in our world right now. So, I mean, my partnership with my husband is really founded in artistry. Like, I think creating together is how we discovered our partnerships and has always been a big part of our relationship is values and artistic aesthetic really aligning. And we've worked on a number of things together, but this is the first thing that we have like truly created from scratch together. We've been calling this play our first child or our playbee, our play baby. And he wrote the actual dialogue. So I like to say that he birthed this play, in his artistic womb, but I am the daddy and the midwife. So that's kind of how we've collaborated. But we actually saw a production of Titus Andronicus. I think it was 2018, maybe 17, I think 2018. That the Independent Shakespeare Company did. We love going to their summer theater at the park. It's just such an LA staple. We're both huge Shakespeare nerds. I've just always loved Shakespeare and just the poetry and the incredible characters and epic stories. And I really believe that Shakespeare shouldn't be treated with preciousness of like we're preserving this old thing, but rather this is incredible source material that we is so rich and we can keep coming back to and seeing how does it land in the world today. um and so Zach and I actually fell in love and began our partnership working on Shakespeare. So it's a really full circle moment for us. Um, Another tragedy, Othello. Not the most auspicious of plays to begin a romance, but here we are over a decade later. Worked out great. But so yeah, we went to see Shakespeare in the Park. We saw Titus. We both love Titus. Zach is also a big horror nerd and loves the medium of horror to explore things that are happening in our world and our society. And Titus is the closest thing Shakespeare has, Titus Andronicus, to a horror play. It's his bloodiest play, it's his goriest play. And it's just an absolutely wild play. It's full of like physical violence and mutilation and blood and people being baked into pies. It's absolutely bananas. But we had such a great time as always seeing Shakespeare in the Park with Indie Shakes. But something about that story got stuck in our brains and we couldn't stop talking about it and thinking about it. Um, and that specifically was the villain character, um, Aaron the Moor, who is the first canonically Black Shakespearean character, is this absolute mustache twirling villain. He's the archetype for villains like Iago in later Shakespeare plays, who it's like, I am the mastermind puppeteer and I direct address to the audience and you love it. And I tell you all these things I'm going to do and then you're going to see me do them. Um, and it's just like, I'm a bad guy. I have no remorse, da 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 da. And he's just this great character. But the really interesting dichotomy, and we were like, what was Shakespeare actually doing? Is that in Titus is really a play about parents getting revenge for their dead children, but at the cost of their living children. Um,
Mm.
and which is why it's such a tragedy. Um, But the one character who doesn't do that is the villain of the piece, is Aaron. He actually turns himself in to save his infant child. And he confesses and
Mm.
takes the blame for everything. And then at the end of the play, almost everybody, like most of the main characters, die on stage. There's this bloody dinner party massacre. It's absolutely bananas. And Aaron actually isn't there, but he's caught and they blame him for everything. And then his sentence is we don't
Mm.
actually see him die, but he's sentenced to be buried up to his chest in the earth and tortured and has sentenced to a death by starvation. It's a very specific, very extreme, horrific death sentence. And so we were like, there's something to that. The other weird thing is that Aaron's greatest weapon is his words. His mind and his voice is his greatest weapon. There are a lot of the things that happen he doesn't do with his own hands. He just puppeteers people. So we were like, okay, that's wild. This master manipulator that they caught, they're sentencing him in a way that they're actually leaving him with access to his greatest weapon, his mind and his voice. So we just couldn't stop talking about all of these interesting um threads that come together to make this character. And so we just started riffing on what happens next. And that really became the way we a lot of this was developed and we co-conceived it. And I think a unique thing of this process is we talked through and created everything that happened in the story. And then Zach sat down and started and actually wrote the dialogue that brought it to life.
Mm.
But we came up with this whole story together and we did a lot of that work in 2020 and 2021. We were quarantined together in our living room. Um, and so I think that and everything that's been happening in our country and the world since then has been deeply influential on the play. But the play is also kind of a mirror for that and has really been the container of, I think, how both of us have processed what is happening and playing with Roman Empire. Titus takes place in ancient Rome, but for Shakespeare, it's really like ancient Rome is a metaphor to explore Elizabethan England. And so we're adding one more layer. It's actually contemporary America. And so it's really a play about a torture and an execution. And It's a play about the nameless guards who, just by doing their job and showing up to work without questioning what they're doing, are complicit in a larger system of violence.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a
There's
lot.
so
There were
much
so
in
many
there.
things.
No, it's so good. It's so good. I was just also like smiling to myself because I got to visit rehearsal yesterday. And I think such a hallmark of who you are as an artist, but also how you lead a room is like the joy and laughter that you bring. So I would love to hear just as a, just, I mean, there's so many intense, like really heavy subjects and like things that we are actively living
Yeah.
through, right? And the people who are in your piece are directly affected by a lot of these systems that are really oppressive. So can you talk about like the joy and levity that also I feel like is contained within the piece? Like how does that live alongside, these sort of brutality and violence?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's such a interesting duality of flavor. And I think that's just so much to the credit of Zach and how he wrote the dialogue. There is so much comedy in this horrific play about an execution. Um, and part of that I think is really effective and something I'm trying to use directorially is when we're caught up in it and we are also the guards, and the guards, there's a lot of scenes where the guards are having a very different experience than Aaron is having. And then as the audience, when we're kind of an extension of the guards and we're laughing and we're caught up in it, when do we realize this is happening while a man is being tortured and executed? Um, but yeah, to speak to finding joy and laughter and release while telling a really heavy story. It's something we've talked a lot about as a cast and an ensemble is just like that this is a thing that happens. Like there is a necessary release valve when you are embodying and telling a story that is so heavy that like there has to be a joy and a playfulness in the process. And our cast is so absolutely exquisite in both their level of talent and dedication, but also their level of care for each other. And I think because of that, there's a lot of room to play. Like you couldn't tell the story with your body night after night if there was not a lot of love and joy within the process. And that's a really big part of my ethos as a director and somebody who has a background in uh, intimacy choreography and trauma sensitivity is just that I like 97% of theater is like, hello, actors, will you reenact trauma with your body to an extent that your body doesn't necessarily know when it's real or not? And like do that for 4 nights a week for 5 weeks, please, plus rehearsal. And so how do we actually make that sustainable? And I think a really big practice for me is building a container. I really see directing as stewardship of story and artists. And like my job is to build a container in which people are cared for, which people feel like they have a sense of belonging, their human dignity is always intact. There's enough support for them that they are able to really go there because they know they are supported and because they have rituals of how to get out of there. So, I always create community agreements. Like, what is our rehearsal culture? How do we want to hold this space with this group of people in this moment of time telling this story? What do we want to be on the same page about? So we not only know going in, but there's also really loving specific language to call folks in case anybody ever bounces outside of that container. Um, and then just like always having, I really believe that rehearsal is a sacred space. I think that it's a very intimate space. And I think at its best, it's an opportunity for every artist who steps in to get to show up as the best version of themselves. Um, and I think having a threshold where you enter and leave rehearsal and creating a ritual around that threshold, even if it's very casual, is incredibly powerful. So we always have a kind of check-in circle where we stretch together and we just check in about how everyone's doing and see what people's boundaries are for the day. And then at the end, we always practice something called de-rolling, which is something that comes from drama therapy, and a lot of intimacy professionals use it. But it's like creating a embodied somatic ritual to release your character's trauma from your body. Um, because we teach actors, I think, a lot of ways. Like, actors are so well equipped with all their own paths to get into characters, but kind of at the end of the work, it's just like, okay, have fun with that. Bye. And so even sometimes it's literally 2 minutes and we just have everyone ground and breathe. I love to like guide a visualization of like you're breathing a mist out of your body, brushing or shaking it off, because different things get activated in folks different days, and you never know. Sometimes you don't even know till you de-roll and you're like, whoa, that was really heavy and now I feel it leaving my body. But part of the commitment to care and sustainability is you don't need to be suffering your character's trauma outside of the rehearsal room. I mean, there are, of course, ways in which, actors and artists like can't help but think about it all the time. And I'm not discouraging that. And met, there are folks who are like, yeah, this does overlap my lived experience. And so there's certain things you can't detangle. But I think specifically having an act where you're putting it down, and not just mentally, because a lot of times we're like, yes, I know intellectually that this isn't mine to hold in this way, or I don't want to take this. But our bodies often need just like a little cue to catch up and to match that. So that's how we always bookend rehearsals, with that kind of care, and just really um, fostering an environment where folks can always speak up and ask for what they need, where people just show up and take care of each other and check in and build that into the culture. And also these actors, all four of them are such clowns and such goofballs, and they are having way too much fun, which is exactly how it should be. But I mean, you were there last night. They have such a playfulness and a camaraderie, which I think that allows folks to go to those deep places and take risks. Like, another piece of language I really love is, for many years, I would talk about how do we make rehearsal a safe space. And that's still my aim, but I think I've learned that one, safety is relative, like it feels and looks different to every person in the room. And two, it's also something that we can't literally control or guarantee, foolish mortals, as I often say about that. And so, like, I don't want to promise something I can't guarantee, but instead, I can commit to holding rehearsal as a brave space, which to me means a space where there's enough support, respect, belonging, human dignity, and care that folks can say a brave yes, which to me means this is something that's outside of my comfort zone or costs me more, but I want to try. And so I think, all of my practices are very actor care centric, um, because I really want to provide a space where folks can be brave and take risks and feel supported enough to take risks and to fail or to touch their own nerve and know that they will still be cared for, and that it's always, human first space is something I say a lot. Like, no art at the cost of anybody's humanity. Otherwise, what are we actually doing? Especially when we're telling a story like this. Sometimes there's in certain productions, there can be this huge disconnect between this is the message and the story that we're telling. But if that is not reflected in the values and the practice of the process, then it kind of negates the power of that. Um, One of my other ethos is as a director is, I call myself a thespomancer, a thespian necromancer, because I think that the director's job is to bring a play, resurrect it from the page, bring it to life. Um, but I also think a play is a spell. It's a ritual that humans do with their bodies and voices and hearts over and over. And they speak these words and they do these actions in front of a live audience, and it has this direct impact on people in front of you. And so I think choosing what spell you cast and also the process of how you cast that spell has an impact on what the audience receives.
Mm, so beautifully said and spoken. I have so many questions. I guess I'll go with, okay, you said, well, okay, no. Okay, I'm gonna go with so many things I could ask you.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
I went on so many
Um,
tangents. I was like,
I
there's a whole
love,
rainbow.
no, it's so, no, that's, I mean, you're talking about your ethos as a director, which was one of my questions is like, how do you talk about your ethos, your practice, your like, your approach, your
Yeah.
vision, as a director? And it's clear so much of your vision and approach is about the space you create, both for your actors and for your audience. And that's such a beautiful thing and something I've learned so much from you. And I'm so grateful for the way you practice for that reason. Because I've definitely borrowed many, many practices that I've learned from you in my process. Um, a question I have for you is how do you care for yourself in holding space for everybody else?
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's a great question and is something I definitely can run into hypocrisy around. I think that a lot of us practice the medicine that we need, and that can be why we're good at it. But sometimes it's a lot harder to do I can speak for myself. It's a lot harder for me to do that for myself than for other people. But for me, I mean, directing a play in the theater is like there's nowhere in the world that I would rather be. It's one of the most nourishing things to me, and particularly like this play and this process because it is um so personal and something that I have poured so much into for so long. It has been a really big pillar of my partnership too. Um I mean, I think when things are particularly stressful and heavy, de-rolling for the self after is really helpful. Like even a hot shower and a visualization of like what you're washing off. But I run
Mhm.
into this so much more when I'm like intimacy directing in other folks' rehearsal rooms. The things that I'm holding, I'll often have to wash off. For this process so far, sometimes there's stressful things just on the practicality of how do we make theater happen. Um, but the artistic process is something that I've found deeply nourishing, and especially just the energy and commitment and just love of the other artists in the room. It's incredible having Karen E, my associate director, like to have another person who's another set of eyes and who I can have conversations with to help me hold the container. I think collaboration is always the answer. Um, and just, yeah, I just think the enthusiasm and love with which other people are showing up to this space, I feel like what I'm pouring out is being poured back into me in this process, which is such an absolute gift. Um, but yeah, there are times, and I'm sure there will be times, and like in Tech Week and stuff, where I'm like, I need to de-roll from all of this. Actually, a really funny story is one of our earliest rehearsals. I was just having a night. This is actually so I started my theatrical journey as an actor. I trained in undergrad as an actor. And then at the end of that, I discovered how much I love directing because I was like, oh, like I love stories so much. I love all the characters. I want to hold the whole thing, not just one part of it. And that just clicked something for me. Um, which I think is actually something my mom always knew and saw. But I was like, no, I'm an actor. I just had to find my way there. Um, oh gosh, I have a place that I'm going with this and my brain just blooped. One second, recalibrating. Um, mm, I'm so glad we can edit. Um,
You were talking about you realized you wanted to be a director in school because you wanted to hold all the characters.
yes.
Collaboration.
Yes. Sorry, it was such a tangent time. I'm just zooming back
You were saying it's a funny
Oh,
story.
yes. Okay.
Funny
Thank you.
story.
That did it. That reactivated my brain. So yeah, so then I was really a often self-produced director for a long time, and part of that is just my play as a spell ethos, where I was like, I don't feel good about just directing any play or a story that I'm like, why do we need to pour into this story? Why do people need to hear this? Um, and then I kind of moved into specializing in intimacy direction as a way, and that actually got me into bigger rooms and was because it's more of a niche and it was incredible for my career. And it also poured into me as a director. Like I learned so many things getting to work on specific moments with actors and directors. And I've also been doing for the last many years while I've been doing that, a ton of new play development and staged readings as a director. But this is the first full production besides a couple fabulous one woman fringe shows that I did in 2024. Um, but besides those, this is the first like full production I've directed since I think 2017, which is bananas. And it's just like, I'm like, this is what I am on this earth to do. But I had to do a little roundabout path to come back to it. But all that to say is I was, just having a moment after an early rehearsal, um, where I was just like having an imposter syndrome moment. I was like, it's been a while. Am I doing this right? And what's happening? And the very next day is when you reached out to me about this grant. And it was the most incredible and affirming moment where I was just kind of like felt vulnerable and was questioning to the universe and got this unbelievable blessing in response to that questioning that was like, yeah, it was so deeply affirming. Um
Oh, that's so
yeah,
beautiful. That makes me so happy. I mean, not that you were having an imposter
we
syndrome,
all do.
but I I I felt like part of why I wanted to support this project is because I have been following your journey as an artist. And I know you've been, wanting to direct at this scale,
Yeah.
right? And you've been doing so much intimacy direction and you're so gifted at that. And like it's just thrilling to me as somebody who admires you, and your work that like you are having this opportunity. So I think it's really beautiful. Um Actually, that was one of my questions, and maybe sort of just like kind of turning the lens a little bit on the story you just told is where, like, how do you see this play as an expression or like in your trajectory as an artist? When I'm taking on a piece, I love your expression of like, oh, this is a spell. Is this a spell I want to cast? Right. So you have to really be behind
Yeah.
it. Another thing that I'm always interested in or asking myself is like how am I going to grow as a director through this process, right? Like what am I learning as part of my practice? How is this going to challenge me? Because if I feel like I read it and I know how to do it, I'm kind of like what, what am I going to like if I don't feel that feeling like ooh, this is going to push me in a way that I'm excited but a little scared about.
Yes.
Then like what then like that's what I get really excited and I feel like you're similar but I don't know that
No,
for sure. But tell me, I
absolutely.
guess, tell me how you feel this project is pushing you and allowing you to grow in ways that you're really excited for your practice.
Yes. I mean, I totally resonate with that. And I do think like stepping into direct to play can be like a brave yes, like we were talking about, where it's like, whoa, I want to do this, but it's not necessarily just like, oh, it's super easy and I'm super confident about everything. But I think just bringing to life something that has been so theoretical for so long and like being like, oh, this is and that is so personal that I have so much deep personal investment in on so many levels. There that can be nerve-wracking to be like, whoa, like my partner and I have worked on this for 7 years and now the ball is in my court to make it happen, to bring it to life. I think really incorporating um design and movement and weaving all the pieces together is pushing me to grow and just being a container. I mean, a lot of things that I have self-produced, I've collaborated with some designers, but like on a lesser level, I'm like, and I will do these three things, myself. And this is still how theater gets made, of course. But I think really this is really an incredible chance for me to kind of expand the container where I really focus on actors and stories to also all the designers as collaborators and bringing this world to life, especially with the resources to make that happen. Um, it's really incredible. Like I have never got to work with I'm a intimacy choreographer. I work in enhancing movement and storytelling for other directors. And this is the first time that I get to have somebody do that for me in this
Mm.
play, which is so exciting and incredible. And is one of my favorite colleagues and dearest friends who's already just brought so much magic. What are you eating? I'm sorry. Can't have that. That's not for you to chew on. Thank you. Thank you. Um, Yeah, so just, like, getting to kind of step into the next level, I mean, I think just sharing this with so many people, leaning into collaboration and the point of the story is just always my kind of rock and my anchor. Um, yeah, I think definitely there's some wild stuff to stage, in this play where it's like, how do you actually do that? Even the set, because it's like a man buried up to his chest in the earth. So, that's such a puzzle. So getting to collaborate with our amazing scenic designer, Colin, on that has been a pleasure and a challenge. And just figuring out how do I support and encourage and leave room for collaboration and creativity while also um, focusing in the container for a unified world and vision. Um, is definitely an
Mm.
very exciting growth edge, I think, for me. And then just, yeah, some of the staging, some of the things, well, we're performing this on a raked stage, which is also so exciting and just was a big part of the scenic puzzle. I've never got to direct on a raked stage. We've been on it one night and already having a great time, and learning so much. But yeah, there's some things in the script that are outside of naturalism and reality. We go into surreality and magic and nightmare. There is literally a nightmare ballet in the script. And that's one of my favorite things as a director. I love when I read a script and I'm like, wow, cool. I understand the narrative and emotional impact of that. How do we actually do that? That's a puzzle that is sometimes intimidating, but always really inspiring and really exciting to solve. So there's definitely a number of those. And I think through the strength of the writing, the incredible talents of the actors and their performance, in getting to collaborate with designers, we're like pulling all the threads of how that's going to come together. And that's still puzzles, I'm actively solving in collaboration.
So cool. So exciting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm curious, like, you spoke a lot in terms of your process as a director and I think what makes you as a director, right, is a lot about the container you hold for your collaborators. I'm curious to like lean into some of the other pieces of your practice as a director, like how you might tackle a nightmare ballet or a scenic puzzle. Like, what are your creative practices that open that imaginative space up for you? Yes. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, throughout this process, I've done a lot of dramaturgy. I mean, both Zach and I have, as we created this together, have really done a lot of that. And as a director, especially, but an artist in general, but like really when I direct, I love to go down like research rabbit holes. And I love to create different resources to share with actors and designers as a like jumping off point. So something that I always do is I create a playlist that's not like, these are the songs that will be used in the play. 'Cause this is the sound designer. We also have an incredible sound designer, Glenn. I'm so excited with what they're cooking up because sound is huge in this play. It's actually written that there's some constant ambient noise until one moment in the final scene.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
Ooh.
yeah. So I'm very excited. But to go to go back on track of what I was answering for you, I something I do with everything I direct, including like new play workshops and staged readings. I have so many of these. I create a playlist that is the mood, the
Mm.
vibe, what I feel like the emotional resonance and narrative of this story is. And it's kind of like an audio collage or an audio mood board. And that's something I would always share with actors and
Mm.
designers to be like, here's the tone, here's the feeling. It's not literally this, but this is my sonic collage. Um, and then also for something like this, when I get to direct a full production, I also create like a Pinterest board and like a visual one and like different parts of like the world and the characters and archetypes. So something I part of my practice as a witch is I'm a tarot reader, and so I'm really interested in archetypes from the tarot. Um, and that was actually a really big thing when we were earlier parts of creating this play. Uh, I was really interested in Aaron as the hanged man, which is one of the major arcana cards. And it is usually actually a man who's hung by his foot from a tree and is upside down. And it's a really interesting
Mm.
image where you're like, wait, you think the card is upside down when it's actually right side up. And it's really a card, it
Mm.
comes after justice and before death in the order of the tarot. And it's really a card about surrender and sacrifice and changing your perspective. And I could go, much deeper into that, but like having this spiritual archetype is a way in which that's helped my brain and heart like puzzle together this play. Um, and Zach Bones is actually also an incredible visual artist. And for our staged reading, I was describing like how would this play look if it was like a riff on the classic Coleman Smith Rider Waite, tarot card. And then he designed something that is like Aaron and the two guards. I can
Cool.
share an image of it, but it's really incredible. And I was like, yes, that's what the play is. Um,
Ah,
so
amazing.
yeah, I love to work in like sound and visual to like get in. And then I also am like a research nerd. I love to like read books. I've actually put together, it's more for me than anyone else, but I have a like I'm still adding some stuff that I haven't had a chance to add, but it's like a currently like 40-page dramaturgy packet. Again, that I'm
Wow.
just like, designers and actors, look at this if this is helpful. But like here's a bunch of things that were part of my process of contributing to conceiving the story um
Mm.
and how I'm approaching directing. And there's actually two, I have them right here, two of my absolute bangers of books that were highly influential. One is this is my possibly my favorite book on theater essays. It's up there with Anne
Ooh.
Bogart, up there with A Director Prepares an Empty Space. But it's called There Must Be Happy Endings on a Theater of Optimism and Honesty, and it's written by a director, Megan Sandberg Zakian. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
it's when I first read this book years ago, I was like, is this my soulmate? Is this me who wrote it? I was just like, I have never felt more seen by very specifically and personally by anything that I've read. Um, and it was something
Wow.
that Zach also read it just a couple years ago. I've read it 3 or 4 times. My book is very very loved and worn. Um, but it's really like, what is the balance that we seek to find as storytellers, as theater makers, as directors specifically, when we need to reflect the honest state of the world as it is, but also want to be able to foster imagination and hope for what the world could be. And what is the delicate balance of that?
Mm.
And that felt so related to the Aaron play. And especially the ending. There must be happy endings, which um, I can talk about. I don't know if it's a spoiler, but originally when Zach and I were fleshing out the story, we were like, oh, it's an echo of Titus. It's an utter tragedy. Like everyone is demolished. Everyone, like nobody survives. And then we're like, it needs to hit that way, but there has to be a glimmer of hope. And so it was a really, really specific needle to thread that was honestly very influenced by this book. I don't know if you want me to say what the
Well,
ending is or
beautiful.
not.
I think that was it. I feel
Great.
like that was
Great.
enough. That
Great.
was
Yes,
that
you'll
was
have to
good.
come see it.
I don't ruin
I
it for
won't. Okay.
me. Yeah, I don't want it. I don't know the ending, and I don't want it being
Yeah.
ruined.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I think that's so
Yeah.
great. That's
And then
beautiful.
the other book, again, this is like my intellectual brain directorial process, is this
Yeah,
incredible. Well,
yeah.
this actually came from a podcast. There's this podcast that's the Folger Shakespeare Library podcast. It's such a like a niche nerdy podcast. Um, but that I don't remember. Maybe Zach discovered it first, but we found this episode about it's called I think Titus Andronicus and Black Lives Matter. And it was a one about Aaron. And we found
Mm,
it a few years into us working on that. And it was so deeply affirming that we were like, yes, that is in the text and pulling these
mm,
things out. And then have listened to a bunch of others. And uh, specifically heard an interview with Farah Kareem Cooper, who wrote this book called The Great White Bard, How to Love Shakespeare While Talking About
mm,
Race. And it's so interesting in looking at historical context and production history of all of the racialized and non-white characters in Shakespeare. In the first chapter, after the first specific character chapter is on Aaron because he is the first canonically Black Shakespeare character. And reading that was this was
mm.
also, I read this book after the drafts of the script have been written. And it was so affirming to be like, oh, this incredible Shakespeare scholar is like, yes, all of these things you found in threads that you've pulled are so aligned. It was just such an incredible synchronicity. And to also
Mm.
just have somebody from a Shakespearean scholar, an educator perspective, um, also articulate all of these things about this character in this play. Um, so yeah, I find all
Love
these
that.
different ways in imagery, spiritual practices, sound, books, intellect, and kind of like to collage that together and then share it with whoever it's helpful for, even if it's just I'm putting it together for my own brain.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I just love hearing about, as directors, I feel like it's such a holistic practice. It's such a like you're borrowing from everything,
Yes.
every sense, right? Every experience, emotional, visual, like spiritual, it's like
Yeah.
everything. And so it's just really cool to hear about. Um, I think it is really hard to talk about what makes us unique as directors, but it is such being a director is such an expression of who we are so specifically.
Yes.
Like I just really believe that. So it's so cool to hear about like how your specific life experiences are what's shaping your vision for this play.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
That's
like
beautiful.
I think it's something it's very invisible work. I think what directors do, and which is
Mhm.
another reason I just so appreciate just this grant and what it's created to do and to uplift like directors are so influential or can be, when you let them and it's the right
Mhm.
piece on supporting and developing a new play. And like I really see I love working on new work. I love playwrights. Like when I first was starting directing, I was like, I love actors. Like I was so actors and I still am. Like, oh my God, what they do is incredible. Like I like trip out about it all the time. I was like, this is unbelievable. And like what a gift. But especially in getting to work on a lot of new play development over the last number of years, I've just discovered this like deep love for playwrights and for getting to collaborate with a writer as a director because I'm
Mm.
looking through this very specific lens of lifting it off of the page and I love stories. I think that that's just always been how I've been able to process the world and connect to people. And so having influence on the generating of stories and just like using whatever parts of my mind, heart, and spirit I can to shed light or share different ideas is so exciting to me.
Mhm. I feel like that's a perfect segue to my last question, which is what part or piece of you do you feel is coming forth in this play? Like as the co-conceiver, co-generator, what piece of you maybe feels the most vulnerable and exciting to share through this piece?
That's such a good question. Um, yeah, I mean, it definitely has my my DNA all over it, but I think it's really an intersection of art, storytelling, and justice and social justice. And in I think for me, I found the most impactful way to engage with this, connected to what I was saying before, is through a story. You know, I think, and this is something, this feels very personal because that's how I experience things. Sometimes facts and news can be so either completely overwhelming or desensitizing, um, especially with social media and the internet and the way that news and information is flooded into our nervous systems. Um, but then there's also we have a responsibility to engage. I'm thinking of the my favorite quote from the Talmud, which is you are not obligated to finish the work, but neither can you walk away from it. I'm paraphrasing it. But
Mm.
that's what I feel like art can be at its best and what I hope to be able to do with art. And so through a story where I think it's very close enough to reality without completely spoon feeding you or being literal naturalism of this moment, I think having just the right amount of a layer of removal allows us to, or can allow us, like as audience members and receivers of stories, as well as tellers of them, to really emotionally access something in ourselves and then be able to intellectually connect it. And I think, you know, which I think I think I'm experiencing a phenomenon which is very common for artists, especially artists who care about justice and the impact of stories beyond entertainment, is that sometimes when there's so much happening in the world, or like, why am I doing this? Is this really the best use of my time and energy? Like, what is this for? But over and over, and through this play, more than maybe anything else, I've been able to return to this is a worthy use of time and energy and resources because I think that story is an access point to empathy. I think story is an access point to new perspective and to consider things in a different way. And I think through the specificity, sometimes we find the universal. Um,
Mm.
and so it just feels very personal to me, and that I think this play is a challenge to the complicitness of the everyday person in how we just show up to work without asking questions, or we just accept this is how it is. Um, when even when that is not a direct act of what we might superficially consider violence, how is that actually really violent behavior? How is
Mm.
passivity and acceptance of the status quo of just like, well, all I can do to get by is show up and do my job and get my paycheck, and that's got to be enough. Um, yeah. I think there's also something that feels really personal and that was a part of it was also this is a very masculine and male character dominated play. And as somebody who is just like for whom feminism And gender expansiveness is such a huge part of my just identity and artistic ethos. And for Zach as well, it was something that we talked about. We're like, all the women in this play are dead. What does that mean? You know? Um, and so we have been exploring with like, okay, like that is the circumstance of Titus, what happens at the end of Titus, but like the two specifically female characters are both ghosts in this play. And so playing with especially Lavinia, who is the most victimized and violated, perhaps, character in Titus Andronicus. She's raped and mutilated, and then her father kills her out of shame because she shouldn't survive her shame after she's brought into all of this
God.
violence. Yeah, and so we're like, what do we do with her? And so she appears first in the Nightmare Ballet, in her mutilated, horrific state. Very, I mean, the archetype that I love for that is like it's Laura Palmer screaming, in Twin Peaks, in the Red Room, the like image of her screaming. But then when she actually appears in the final scene of the play, something that was really important that we talked about a lot is that she's whole. In death, those things were not
Mm,
taken from her. And there's even this
mm,
meta-ness that I think Zach found really beautifully in the text of just like her even naming. She was like, I don't disappear when she's like, I'm not only exist in relation to the men around me. And so like even in this weird meta way where she's there and Aaron is like, oh, like you're here to haunt me or to take me to hell. And she's like, it's not, it's not about you. What if I was just already here? And so
mm.
there's some really interesting layers in of that as well that feel very personal. And our actor, we have a non-binary actor who plays non-binary femme who plays the shapeshifter um, track, which is absolutely wild. So it's both a ghost and a little boy and a messenger. Um,
Mm.
yeah, but I think so much of this play feels so personal. I mean, like anytime you direct and you share the doors are closing behind a ghost. I think you probably know this also. When you direct and people come and see it, it's so personal. And like it's this reminded me of something you were saying earlier, or that activated this in my brain, that how personal of an art directing is and how much of the self you put into it. But it's like, an actor gets to have the mask of the character, but their body and voice is there. But the director is kind of behind everything. And like when people see something I direct, like it is so vulnerable and so personal because so much of myself is poured into this. And so as somebody who also helped conceive this story, and who it was written in the literal voice of my partner, who I think is all of the characters in this play are him in a way too, in this
Mm.
really beautiful way. Um, it's such a personal and vulnerable thing to share, but it's also like, this is what I ask the actors to do. This is what I'm asking the playwright to do. This is if I'm asking for vulnerability from everybody else, like I need to give that same offer.
Mm. So beautiful. So beautifully said. Thank you so much for this amazing
Oh my gosh,
conversation.
thank you. It's just such a pleasure. I
Yeah,
love talking to directors about directing. More of it.
me too. Me too. Me too. This was really inspiring, and I'm so excited to see the play when it comes up and for the world to
Yeah,
see.
me too.
Yeah. Are there any final words you want to share?
Um, no, I'm so just deeply honored and grateful and thrilled by this grant. It's just such a blessing on this production. And even larger than that, like opening the conversation to honor the work of directors and the vulnerability and the personalness of that, and to just uplift like recognizing directors as generators of stories and of theater. I think that can really shift the way that we collaborate, especially in like the LA theater landscape. And I'm just really
Mm.
excited to see what conversations and collaborations come from this.
Me too. Me too. Yay.